Hello, and welcome back for another instalment of The Little Mermaid. If you remember last time, The Little Mermaid had been to see the sorceress, and she's traded her voice in order to have a chance at pursuing true love with the prince. But what will happen? Will she get to meet him, and will he fall in love with her so she can get her voice back and live happily ever after? Who knows? Let's find out, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay. The sun had not yet risen when she arrived at the prince's dwelling and ascended those well-known marble steps. The moon still shone in the sky when the little mermaid drank off the wonderful liquid contained in her phial. She felt it run through her like a sharp knife, and she fell down in a swoon. When the sun rose, she awoke and felt a burning pain in all her limbs, but she saw, standing close by, the object of her love, the handsome young prince, whose coal-black eyes were fixed inquiringly upon her. Full of shame, she cast down her own and perceived, instead of the long fish-like tail she had hitherto borne, 2 slender legs. But she was quite naked and tried in vain to cover herself with her long, thick hair. The prince asked who she was and how she'd got there, and she, in reply, smiled and gazed upon him with her bright blue eyes, for alas, she could not speak. He then led her by the hand into the palace. She found that what the witch had told her true. She felt as though she were walking on the edges of sharp swords, but she bore the pain willingly. On she passed, light as a zephyr, and all who saw her wondered at her light, undulating movements. When she entered the palace, rich clothes of muslin and silk were brought to her. She was lovelier than all who dwelt there, but she could neither speak nor sing. Some female slaves, gaily dressed in silk and gold brocade, sang before the prince and his royal parents, and one of them distinguished herself by her clear, sweet voice, which the prince applauded by clapping his hands. This made the little mermaid very sad, for she knew that she used to sing far better than the young slave. Alas, thought she, if he did but know that for his sake I have given away my voice for ever. The slaves began to dance. Our lovely little mermaiden then arose, stretched out her delicate white arms, and hovered gracefully around the room. Every motion displayed more and more the perfect symmetry and elegance of her figure, and the expression which beamed in her speaking eyes touched the hearts of the spectators far more than the song of the slaves. All present were enchanted, but especially the young prince, who called her his dear little foundling. And she danced again and again, although every step cost her excessive pain. The prince then said she should always be with him, and accordingly a sleeping place was prepared for her on velvet cushions in the anteroom of his own apartment. The prince caused a suit of male apparel for her to be made, in order that she might accompany him in his rides. So together they traversed the fragrant woods, where green boughs brushed against their shoulders and the birds sang merrily among the fresh leaves. With him she climbed up the steep mountains, and although her tender feet bled so as to be remarked by the attendants, she only smiled and followed her dear prince to the heights, whence they could see the clouds chasing each other beneath them like a flock of birds migrating to other countries. During the night, she would, when all in the palace were at rest, walk down the marble steps in order to cool her feet in the deep waters. She would then think of those beloved ones who dwelt in the lower world. One night, as she was thus bathing her feet, her sisters swam together to the spot, arm in arm and singing, but alas, so mournfully. She beckoned to them. They immediately recognized her and told her how great was the mourning in her father's house for her loss. From this time, the sisters visited her every night, and once they brought with them the old grandmother, who had not seen the upper world for a great many years. They likewise brought their father, the Mer-King, with his crown on his head, but these 2 old people did not venture near enough to land to be able to speak to her. The little mermaiden became dearer and dearer to the prince every day, but he only looked upon her as a sweet, gentle child, and the thought of making her his wife never even entered his head. And yet his wife she must be, ere she could receive an immortal soul. His wife she must be, or she would change into foam and be driven relentlessly over the billows of the sea. "Dost thou not love me above all others?" her eyes seemed to ask as he pressed her fondly in his arms and kissed her lovely brow. "Yes," the prince would say, "thou art dearer to me than any other, for no one is as good as thou art. Thou lovest me so much, and thou art so like a young maiden whom I have seen but once, and may never see again. I was on board a ship which was wrecked by a sudden tempest. The waves threw me to the shore near a holy temple where a number of young girls are occupied constantly with religious services. The youngest of them found me on the shore and saved my life. I saw her only once, but her image is vividly impressed upon my memory, and her alone can I love. But she belongs to the holy temple, and thou who resemblest her so much hast been given to me for consolation." "Alas, he does not know that it was I who saved his life," thought the little mermaiden, sighing deeply. "I bore him over the wild waves into the wooded bay where the holy temple stood. I sat behind the rocks waiting till someone should come. I saw the pretty maiden approach whom he loves more than me." And again she heaved a deep sigh, for she could not weep. "He said that the young girl belongs to the holy temple. She never comes out into the world, so they cannot meet each other again. And I am always with him, see him daily. I will love him and devote my whole life to him."
"So, the prince is going to be married to the beautiful daughter of the neighbouring king," said the courtiers. "That's why he's having that splendid ship fitted out. It's announced that he has wished to travel. But in reality, he goes to see the princess. A numerous retinue will accompany him."
The little mermaiden smiled at these and similar conjectures, for she knew the prince's intentions better than anyone else. "I must go," he said to her. "I must see the beautiful princess. My parents require me to do so, but they will not compel me to marry her and bring her home as my bride. And it is quite impossible for me to love her, for she cannot be so like the beautiful girl in the temple as thou art, and if I were obliged to choose, I should prefer thee, my little silent foundling with thy speaking eyes." And he kissed her rosy lips, played with her locks, and folded her in his arms, whereupon arose in her heart a sweet vision of human happiness and immortal bliss. "Thou art not afraid of the sea, art thou, my sweet silent child?" asked he tenderly as they stood together in the splendid ship which was to take them to the country of the neighbouring king. And then he told her of the storms that sometimes agitate the waters, of the strange fishes that inhabit the deep, and of the wonderful things seen by divers. But she smiled at his words, for she knew better than any child of the earth what went on in the depths of the ocean. At night time, when the moon shone brightly and when all on board were fast asleep, she sat in the ship's gallery, looking down into the sea. It seemed to her, as she gazed through the foamy track made by the ship's keel, that she saw her father's palace and her grandmother's silver crown. She then saw her sisters rise out of the water, looking sorrowful and stretching out their hands towards her. She nodded to them, smiling, and would have explained that everything was going on quite according to her wishes. But just then the cabin boy approached, upon which the sisters plunged back beneath the water so suddenly that the boy thought that what he had seen on the waves was nothing but foam. The next morning the ship entered the harbour of the king's splendid capital. Bells were rung, trumpets sounded, and soldiers marched in procession through the city with waving banners and glittering bayonets. Every day witnessed some new entertainments. Balls and parties followed each other. The princess, however, was not yet in the town. She had been sent to a distant convent for education, and had there been taught the practices of all royal virtues. At last she arrived at the palace. The little mermaid had been anxious to see this unparalleled princess, and she was now obliged to confess that she had never before seen such a beautiful creature. The skin of the princess was so white and delicate that the veins might be seen through it, and her dark eyes sparkled beneath a pair of finely formed eyebrows. "It is herself," exclaimed the prince when they met. "It is she who saved my life when I lay like a corpse on the seashore." And he pressed his blushing bride to his beating heart. "Oh, I am all too happy," said he to his dumb foundling. What I never dared to hope for has come to pass. Thou must rejoice in my happiness, for thou lovest me more than all others who surround me." And the little mermaid kissed his hand in silent sorrow. It seemed to her as if her heart was breaking already, although the morrow of his marriage day, which must inevitably see her death, had not yet dawned. What is going to happen? Tune in and discover the conclusion of this story next time. Thank you.